I stood in the kitchen, my apron stained with grease, the smell of grilled meat and burnt bread clinging to my skin like a thin veil of smoke. Outside, cheerful music blasted from the Bluetooth speaker, mixing with the lively chatter of my parents and nearly 30 guests raising glasses to celebrate their 35th wedding anniversary. A big party, strung with twinkle lights and fresh flowers, hosted right in the backyard of our wooden house in the suburbs of Charleston, South Carolina. I, Christina, 33, am the eldest daughter, also the one who started setting up the tent before sunrise, carried every table and chair into the yard, hung every string light on the oak tree, and grilled countless batches of burgers for the big happy family, soaking in the festive mood. Lisa, my younger sister, was lounging on a wicker chair by the pool, sipping a cocktail her husband had mixed. Our youngest, Jack, was laughing with the kids, and no one cared that I was still working the grill. Sweat soaked the back of my shirt, but no one asked a single question. By the time the sunset bathed the garden in golden light, my father, Robert, stood up and gently tapped his silver spoon against a glass. Everyone immediately fell silent, turning their attention to him. My mother, Margaret, stood beside him, her arm looped through his, beaming. "We have something special to share," my father said in a deep voice, full of pride. "Next week, the whole family is going on vacation to the Florida Keys. A 7-day trip, all booked. There'll be blue water, white sand, and an outdoor party right on a yacht." Cheers erupted like fireworks. Lisa hugged her husband and jumped with excitement. Jack shouted, "Yes! I told you there'd be a surprise." My mom nodded nonstop, her face glowing. For a moment, I felt a wave of relief. A vacation. Maybe this was finally my chance to rest after so many years of being the one behind the scenes. I washed my hands, walked toward the table, and gave a polite smile. "When are we leaving? I'll need to adjust my work schedule a bit." The air suddenly felt unnaturally still. Eyes glanced at me, then quickly turned away as if my question had never been asked. My father frowned, his gaze turning cold. "You don't need to know," he said slowly, clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You're not part of us." I thought I misheard. My eyes widened and I froze. My mother scoffed and shrugged, like his words weren't worth caring about. She turned to chat with a distant aunt, leaving me standing in the middle of the yard with empty hands. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to drown out every sound in my head. Then the murmurs picked back up, washing over me like a wave of indifference. I had cleaned the house, made the shopping list, cooked Mom's favorite stew, and ran around to make sure this party went perfectly. And yet, the daughter who gave up a study abroad opportunity to stay home and care for the family when Dad had a stroke, was being treated like an outsider. I don't remember how I slipped away from the crowd. I only realized I was on the porch when I felt my hand gripping my purse tightly. The heavy summer air didn't bother me nearly as much as the weight in my chest. It felt like someone had slammed shut a door I'd been holding open for decades. "Christina, are you okay?" Lisa's voice came from behind, hesitant. I didn't turn around. I opened the wooden gate and walked out, leaving the twinkling lights behind me. Each step down the gravel path toward the garage felt like it was tearing apart the last piece of me that still held on to their kindness. I got into my car, shut the door, and cranked up the AC, trying to blow away everything that had just happened. I didn't cry. I just felt empty, like everything inside me had been drained. I turned on the radio. An old country song came on, singing about leaving a place once called home. I nodded quietly. Maybe it was time for me to leave too. Not to run away, but to start living. I returned to my small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building in the south of Savannah, where every step in the hallway echoed with creaky wood and the scent of nearby meals lingered in the air. The place was only about 430 square feet, but I kept it spotless, my own little corner of the world, untouched by anyone else. I took off my heels, sank into the armchair by the window, and stared into the dark sky. Outside was an empty parking lot, yellow lights reflecting off the hoods of worn-out cars. The party was over. My father's words still echoed in my head like a cut that wouldn't heal. "You're not part of us." I had sacrificed my youth to carry their burdens. At 19, I turned down a full-ride scholarship to stay home and care for Mom after her minor stroke. At 24, I took out a loan to buy Dad's truck when his business went under. At 30, I planned Lisa's wedding, while all she had to do was pick out a dress. I was their shadow, silent, unseen, and no one ever thought to say thank you. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the living room floor, pulling out boxes from under the bed, old keepsakes, family photos from when I was a little girl clutching a teddy bear behind Mom's legs, a birthday card I made in 5th grade that no one ever responded to. I had kept everything like proof that I existed in that house. But now, they all felt meaningless. At 3 a.m., I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and pulled an old suitcase from the top of the closet. I didn't need much: a few outfits, my travel camera, a journal, and some essentials. I opened the small drawer by the bed and took out the envelope with the savings I had quietly set aside each month, even though my office job didn't pay much. Nearly $1,200. Not enough for a luxurious new life, but enough to leave this place and breathe on my own terms. I opened Google Maps on my phone, looking at the map of the US with countless little glowing dots, like invitations. I wanted the ocean. I needed the air of freedom, of wide-open spaces where no one gave orders or reminded me to become a version of myself they expected. I remembered a coastal city on the west side of Florida, Clearwater. I had once come across the name in a travel article, a place with soft white sands stretching far and palm trees swaying in the ocean breeze. I had never been there, which only made it more appealing. I booked the earliest bus, 6 a.m. from the Savannah Greyhound station, one way. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and slung my backpack over my shoulder while the sky was still wrapped in a thin layer of fog. The station was quiet, with only a few people scattered around: a woman holding a cat in a fabric bag, a young man wearing headphones staring at his phone. I bought a bland cup of coffee from a vending machine and sat down to wait. The bus arrived, the doors opened, and the driver greeted me with sleepy but friendly eyes. I stepped on, handed over my ticket, and chose a seat by the window. As the wheels began to turn, I looked through the glass and saw my reflection mixed with the dimming streetlights. Savannah faded into the distance, taking with it the years I had once called home. I didn't know what waited for me in Clearwater: a new job, a temporary place to stay, or just days wandering by the sea. But one thing I knew for sure: the place I had just left was no longer home. And this time, I wasn't running. I was choosing. I quietly opened my notebook, turned to a blank page, and wrote the first line in firm handwriting. Day 1, I begin again, from myself. I arrived in Clearwater close to noon, the sun high above and the heat rising from the pavement like a foggy mirror. The bus station was small. Just an information desk, a few benches, and a vending machine. I stood still for a moment, gripping the strap of my backpack, looking around the unfamiliar city with my heart pounding. No one knew who I was, and that felt more comforting than I expected. I rented a small room above an old bar called Theo's, less than a 10-minute walk from the beach. The innkeeper, Mr. Theo, a man in his 60s with salt-colored beard and eyes sharp enough to read your thoughts, just waved off my question about ID. Pay a week up front? Around here, everyone's needed a fresh start. My room was a small attic space, just enough for a single bed, a worn wooden desk, and a window facing the parking lot. Downstairs, the bar buzzed every night, but I didn't mind. The music and laughter felt like a different rhythm of life, a sound that reminded me the world was still spinning, and I was now part of a different corner of it. The next morning, I walked barefoot along the beach, my feet sinking lightly into the sand. The salty breeze tangled my hair, but I didn't bother to fix it. I stepped into a small cafe called Misty Beans, sitting on a corner near the harbor with a hand-painted sign and chipped wooden chairs. The girl behind the counter had a chestnut pixie cut and smoky gray eyes. She glanced at me from head to toe, then said without greeting, "We're seriously short on staff. You know how to pull an espresso?" I froze for a second. "I can learn fast." She raised an eyebrow, then tossed me an apron. "I'm Brooke, starting today. Don't spill milk on the steamer. It just got cleaned." I didn't know what made Brooke hire me after just one sentence, but from that moment, I was part of Misty Beans, a little coffee shop full of odd but genuine people. Regulars included fishermen, dock workers, a few musicians who dropped by to play harmonica in the corner, and an older woman who ordered a decaf every morning but never finished it. Brooke was sharp, a bit blunt but not unkind. She worked like a whirlwind, fast, precise, and never polite. But at the end of each shift, she'd quietly leave a whole muffin set aside for me, without saying a word. Maybe that was her way of caring. One afternoon after work, I wandered into a thrift store tucked deep in an alley behind a church. In the darkest corner of the shop, I spotted an old, dusty camera, square-shaped with peeling faux leather at the edges. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. Canon AE1, a film camera I had once dreamed of back in high school. "Want it?" the shop owner asked, voice low and raspy. "Still works, just needs film." I hesitated, then nodded. Buying it wasn't exactly a wise financial move, but I felt like I had just picked up a piece of memory long forgotten. I used to own a similar camera, but I sold it to help Dad pay the electric bill when I was 20. This time, I bought it for myself. That night, I sat on the back steps behind the bar, the first roll of film already loaded. I snapped a few shots, dim streetlights, tree shadows stretching across the pavement, a couple walking by, hand in hand. The photos wouldn't be perfect, the lighting wasn't right, but pressing that shutter made my heart stir to a rhythm I thought I had forgotten. Brooke passed by, eyeing me curiously. "Thought you only knew how to make coffee." I smiled softly, lifted the camera, and snapped a picture of her in the yellow glow. "Turns out I still remember I once had a dream." She didn't say anything, but gave a slight nod, as if she understood more than I had shared. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something inside me slowly coming back to life. Not for anyone else, but because I had finally started listening to myself. One evening after my shift, I was sitting in my cramped attic room, soft yellow light spilling onto a freshly developed photo hanging on the wall. A shot of the dock at sunset, orange blending into purple between the cables stretching across the sky. I had just finished cleaning up and opened a new box of film when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with the words "Emily, little sister." My heart sank. I let it ring a few times before answering, holding it to my ear without saying anything first. Emily's voice came through, full of concern. "Where are you? Everyone's freaking out because you just left like that. Mom said you didn't say a word, just disappeared, like you never existed." I leaned my head against the wall and took a deep breath. Emily was only 19, the only one in the family who had ever asked if I was tired, who once sat with me the whole afternoon when I got sick from overworking while still having to take care of the kids. "I'm okay, and I need this. Not to run away, but to find myself again." I spoke softly, without a hint of anger. "But they're saying all kinds of stuff about you. Mom called you ungrateful. Dad got so mad he smashed the TV remote." Emily paused, then sighed. "You know what? They still plan to go to Florida, but now they're making me stay home to watch the kids. I told them I couldn't, and they said, 'Then call Christina. Tell her to come back and make it right.'" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the story had gotten so old it was almost boring. Make it right? I lived like a shadow in that house for over a decade. What exactly am I making right? I know better than anyone." Emily's voice softened. "But they never see it. They just see you as the one who can handle everything." "And they were wrong," I said firmly. "This time, I'm not coming back to patch up the cracks they made. You need to understand that." Emily was quiet, then whispered, "I miss you." "I miss you too," I replied. "But if I go back, I'll be pulled right back into that role, and I can't live that life again." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she ended the call with a quiet sigh. I stared at the phone for a long time, feeling heavy, but I knew I couldn't falter now. Just 2 days later, while I was wiping tables at Misty Beans, my phone rang again. This time it was Mom. I wasn't going to answer, but then, out of some old reflex I hadn't quite let go of, I swiped the screen. "Christina?" Her voice came through immediately, no greeting. "Do you still care about this family at all? Walking out in the middle of everything? Do you think that was the right thing to do?" I put the rag down and stepped into the back of the shop to get away from the noise. I already said, I need space. I'm not the one who cleans up behind everyone anymore. "Don't raise your voice," Mom snapped. "You've thrown the whole family into chaos. Lisa can't handle all 3 kids. Jack has to work overtime. Who's supposed to watch them? Weren't you always the best at that?" I let out a dry laugh, my voice still calm. Yes, I was good at it. So good that everyone thought it was my duty. But it wasn't. It was a sacrifice. And now I'm choosing not to sacrifice anymore. She paused for a second, then said, cold as ice, "If you walk away this time, don't expect to come back. We don't need selfish people." I swallowed hard, then spoke, my voice steady. "Good. Because I don't need a family that only sees me when they need something. I used to be the pillar that held everyone up, and all I got in return was being forgotten." "Christina," I cut her off. "I spent my whole youth making sure everyone else was okay. I skipped college. I worked 2 jobs. I gave pieces of my life to everyone else. Now, I just want to keep one piece for myself. If that makes me selfish in your eyes, then so be it." I hung up before she could say anything more. My heart was pounding. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my fingertips turned white. Brooke passed by, raising an eyebrow. "You look like you just ran a marathon in the sun. Call home?" I nodded and sighed. "Not easy, but necessary." She smirked and handed me a cold lemonade. "Cut the anchor if you want the boat to float." I gave a faint smile. There was a quiet truth in her joke. I had started to leave the old waters behind, even if the new waves were shaky. At least this time, I was the one steering. That night, after a nearly 10-hour shift, I was just about to head upstairs when Brooke stopped me at the back door of Misty Beans. She had on a denim jacket, a canvas backpack slung over her shoulder, and that familiar half-smile, half-sarcastic look on her face. "Christina," she said, "there's a photography class tonight at the community center near the beach. A friend of mine, Julian, is teaching. You should check it out. Bring that dusty old camera of yours." I blinked in surprise. "I thought you didn't believe I could take a decent photo," she winked. "I still don't. But Julian has an eye. Who knows? Maybe your photos aren't that bad." Instead of going back to my room like usual, I followed her to the community center, a 1-story cream-colored building tucked behind a row of palm trees. The classroom was lit with warm yellow lights, the chairs arranged in a circle, and photographs hung all over the walls. From crashing waves to toothless elderly smiles. Julian was a man in his 40s, with long hair tied back and ink stains always on his hands. He looked at me, then at the camera in my hand, and smiled. "Canon AE1, a classic choice," he said. "You shot before?" "I did, but it's been a long time," I replied, my voice low. "Then it's perfect timing." Julian nodded. "This class isn't about turning anyone into a pro. We just want to help people see the things they've forgotten to notice." That evening's class had no dry theory, no overwhelming techniques, just conversations about light, emotion, and the stories hidden in every image. Julian gave me my first assignment. Photograph something you can't forget. I went out to the beach early the next morning, camera in hand, heart feeling empty. I didn't know what to shoot. But then, in that moment when the light filtered through the beams of the old pier, I raised the camera. That became the first shot in a series of photos capturing pieces of what shaped me. A rusted bike abandoned by a fence. A young mother pushing a stroller while holding a second child in her arms. Sandals neatly lined up outside someone's front door. Each image felt like a whisper from memory. Distant, yet achingly familiar. Julian started paying more attention to me. He would linger longer in front of the photos I brought in. One day, he said, "Christina, your photos have something real. Not perfect, but honest. You should think about putting them into a set." I was a bit unsure. "You mean, like an exhibit?" He nodded. "There's a local photo showcase next month. The theme is me and the pieces I carry." "I think your work fits." I spent a whole week thinking it over. But one night, flipping through my developed negatives, I realized the set had its own rhythm. A story without words. I titled it, "Roots and Wings," because I had once clung so tightly to where I came from, but now I was learning how to fly away. The day of the exhibit took place in a renovated warehouse turned art space. My photos were displayed on a panel of raw wood. The lights above cast shadows onto each frame. I wore a simple pale blue dress, my hair loosely pinned up, standing among strangers, each sipping wine slowly. Julian came over, placed a hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "You've stepped out of your shadow." An older woman stopped in front of the photo I took of the rusty bike. She turned to me and asked, "Did you take this?" I nodded. She smiled, her eyes slightly glassy. It reminded me of my childhood. I had a bike just like that. "Thank you." Just those 3 words, "thank you," made something inside me tremble. For the first time, something I created, not for anyone else, not out of duty, but for myself, had touched someone else. That night, I left the exhibit after the streetlights had come on. Brooke waved at me from a distance, raising a soda can in celebration. Julian shook my hand and told me a small gallery was considering inviting me to join a street photography series. I walked along the beach, the waves gently brushing the shore. Inside, there were no more questions like, do I deserve this, or what would they think if they saw me here? In their place was something simple but whole. I was heading in the right direction. And for the first time in many years, I knew with certainty the place where I belonged wasn't where people needed me to do everything. It was where I got to be myself. One afternoon in early April, I was behind the counter at Misty Beans, quickly whipping up a round of lattes for a group of tourists from New Jersey, when the bell above the door jingled. I looked up, out of habit, and as soon as my eyes hit the doorway, I froze. He stood there. Robert Mitchell, a tall man with neatly combed salt and pepper hair, wearing the same old plaid shirt I had ironed for him hundreds of times. My father. He didn't look around the shop, didn't greet anyone, just stared straight at me, as if nothing else existed in the room filled with the smell of coffee and quiet chatter but him and me. I set the latte down on the tray, wiped my hands on a cloth, and stepped out from behind the counter. My heart pounded, like part of me hadn't quite prepared for this moment. But my feet didn't tremble, not like they used to. "You came a long way," I said calmly. "Clearwater's over 400 miles from Savannah." My father cleared his throat, his gaze stiff. "We need to talk." I signaled to Brooke. She nodded and took over the counter without a word. I led my father to the back of the shop, where a wooden bench sat under a low-hanging palm tree, sunlight flickering through the leaves and scattering patterns across the ground. Dad sat down first, slowly, as if carrying the weight of something heavy. I sat across from him, arms folded. Your mother's very disappointed," he began, his voice not loud but heavy enough to weigh down the air. "The Florida trip was canceled. Lisa couldn't handle the 3 kids. Jack got into a fight with his wife and left for 3 days. Everything's a mess." I looked at him, neither nodding nor shaking my head. Just silent. "We didn't expect you to just walk away like that," he continued, "without saying a word. It's like the family means nothing to you anymore." I gave a thin smile without a trace of sarcasm. And what about that day? When you told me I wasn't part of the family? Was I supposed to stay, keep wiping tables, holding babies, and faking smiles while you all ignored me during the vacation? His face twitched slightly, but he didn't argue. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in him. The man who always believed he had the right to raise his voice, make decisions, and pile every burden onto me without a single thank you. You don't know how much you've sacrificed, he said, a little softer. I nodded. You're right. You don't know. Because when I withdrew my application to study photography in Boston to stay home and care for Mom, you said it was the natural thing to do. When I gave Lisa all my savings for her wedding, Mom said it was what the eldest sister should do. But now, no one's left to carry the load. And no one knows what to do. I leaned back against the bench, looking him straight in the eye. I'm not angry. Not anymore. But I'm also not obligated to come back and patch up a life everyone assumed I'd always be there to save. He stayed quiet for a long time. For a moment, I thought he might blow up, stand up and walk away. But instead, he just exhaled slowly. I didn't realize how much this hurt you. I was surprised by that sentence, not because he apologized, he still hadn't, but because for the first time he admitted he hadn't known. It was the first crack in the wall I thought would never change. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice lower now. Rebuilding my life, working at a cafe, learning photography again. I had my first exhibition last week. Someone bought one of my photos. He tilted his head slightly, a shift in his eyes. I didn't know you were still taking pictures. I smiled faintly. You never asked. We sat a few more minutes in silence. The wind rustled through the palm leaves, carrying the salty air and the faint sound of music from the cafe. Finally, he stood up. He didn't reach out, didn't say anything sentimental. The door at home's still open if you want to come back. I stood too, not nodding, not promising. I just said, I am home, Dad, right here. He gave a small nod, one I couldn't tell was out of acceptance or reluctance. But whatever it was, as his figure disappeared behind the row of buildings, I felt a part of the weight in my chest lift. I hadn't gotten angry, hadn't run, hadn't caved in. I had said everything I needed to say. And most importantly, I no longer felt like I owed them anything. I went back inside the cafe, where the smell of coffee was still warm and customers' laughter still filled the air. Brooke raised an eyebrow when she saw me come in. You okay? I nodded, my smile small but certain. Better than ever. 2 weeks after seeing Dad, I received an email from a local art gallery called Babysit Collective. They had attended the photo showcase at the community center and were especially drawn to the Roots and Wings collection. In the email, they invited me to display several of my photos in the upcoming summer exhibition, a yearly event that draws both locals and visitors from all over to Clearwater. I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding. For the first time in my life, a door I thought I'd missed forever had opened in the most unexpected way. No more, Christina, can you help out? Or, hey, can you watch the kids for a bit? But Christina, the photographer. I brought the news to the cafe, planning to tell Brooke after my shift. But the moment I stepped into the prep kitchen, she turned around with a look that said she already knew everything. You got the invite from Babysit, didn't you? She asked, one hand pouring milk, the other pressing the espresso grinder. I blinked. How'd you know? Julian's terrible at keeping secrets, she smirked. Anyway, I told you, you have the eye of someone who's lived in silence. I didn't answer right away. But later, back in that dim attic room, I sat down and opened the leather notebook I used to jot down a line or two each day. On a fresh page, I wrote, I've stepped out of the shadows and the light doesn't scare me anymore. 3 days later, I got a text from Emily. Just one line. They're planning a trip to Hawaii. This time, Mom hired a babysitter. I looked at the message, feeling something old and dusty dissolve inside me. Not bitterness, not regret, just a clear awareness. They figured it out without me. They didn't need me. And that wasn't as sad as I once thought. I replied simply, "Have a great trip. Take care of yourself." Emily sent back a smiley face, then silence. But that was enough. I knew she understood, and I no longer needed to prove anything. The Baylight Collective exhibit took place on a breezy May afternoon, with cool sea air drifting through the tourist-filled streets. The gallery space was inside a renovated warehouse. White walls, bare wooden floors, and warm yellow lighting like late sunlight. My photos were displayed in the last section, 5 in total, arranged along the length of a journey. The first was a shot of an empty pier at sunset, symbolizing separation. The final one was a photo I took of Brooke standing beneath the palm tree behind the cafe, holding a cup of coffee and smiling. Soft light falling on her hair like an unnamed piece. I stood quietly watching people pass by, their eyes lingering on the photos. No one knew who I was, and I liked that. I was no longer Big Sister Christina, the one who handles everything. I was a storyteller. Through light and time. A middle-aged woman stopped in front of the palm tree and stood there for a while. She turned to me and asked softly, "Did you take this?" I nodded. She gently touched her chest and smiled. "I don't know why, but this photo makes me want to go home." I thanked her, though my throat tightened. It was the first time someone truly felt what I tried to capture. That sense of being lost, then finding yourself again through something simple. An hour later, a gallery representative came to find me, announcing that the old pier, the first photo in the Roots and Wings series, had been purchased by a collector from New Orleans. $200. Not a large sum, but to me, it was a quiet confirmation that I had done the right thing. That night, I left the gallery with an envelope of cash in my hand and unformed dreams in my head. I stopped by Misty Beans. Brooke was cleaning up the last of the cups. "Can I buy you a cappuccino?" I asked, half joking. She glanced at me. "I thought you were a big-shot artist now, coming back to play barista?" I laughed. "No. I came back because this place is part of the journey. And I still love coffee." We sat by the window, streetlights sparkling outside. I told her about the woman at the gallery, the photo buyer, and how I no longer felt the pull to return to the things that once held me down. "You've found your freedom," Brooke said, her voice soft like waves. I didn't answer. I just looked out at the street, where an old bicycle rolled past under the lights, leaving a trail of shimmer like a never-ending current. I knew, from that moment on, I wasn't going back. Because this life, simple as it may be, windswept as it still is mine. Leaving my family wasn't something I ever imagined I'd do, but the moment they pushed me out of their world, another door opened, the one that led to freedom. I am no longer the one who carries the weight, no longer the shadow behind their expectations. Now, I live my own life with my old camera, mornings by the sea, and a quiet peace in my heart. I don't regret it, because for the first time, I'm not living to please anyone else. I'm living to be myself. What do you think about Christina's journey? Have you ever felt the same way she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, honest stories about family and life. Under the soft yellow glow of the Christmas tree, the room was filled with the scent of gingerbread and cinnamon. The light from the fireplace danced across the old decorations my mom had kept since I was a child. Outside, snow fell quietly, leaving a hazy layer over the window pane. But the cold I felt didn't come from winter. It sat deeper, in my chest, in the quiet tightness between the smiles and hopeful glances. Everything about this Christmas felt uncomfortably familiar. And just like every year, I knew exactly what was about to happen. My mom, in a bright red robe, stood in the middle of the living room with such satisfaction that you could feel it even before she spoke. She held a small box, wrapped in shimmering gold paper and tied with a delicate white bow. My dad sat beside her, a cup of tea in his hand, his face thoughtful but his eyes full of pride. And at the center of it all, just like always, was Lauren, my sister. Lauren sat perfectly poised on the couch, red nails tracing the rim of her hot chocolate mug, her silky blonde hair flawlessly in place. Her smile was part excitement, part certainty that the best thing in the room would always belong to her. Mom stepped forward, placing the gift box into Lauren's hands, her voice brimming with excitement. "We've been planning this gift for a long time. You deserve it." Lauren blinked, then slowly began unwrapping the paper, just enough to let everyone feel the anticipation in each movement. She always knew how to stretch a moment so that all eyes stayed on her. Even before seeing it, I already knew it would be something special. Not just an ordinary gift, and I was right. As the final piece of wrapping fell away, the small box opened to reveal a gleaming silver key nestled in black velvet. Lauren gasped, a sharp breath escaping as if she'd just been handed the rarest diamond in the world. "I can't believe it," her voice soared, as perfect as a line from a luxury commercial. My mom placed a hand on her shoulder, voice full of pride. "Sweetheart, this is the key to your new home. We bought you your own apartment. Now you have a place of your own." The room erupted in congratulations. My dad nodded in approval. Lauren threw herself into both of their arms, repeating, thank you," as if she had just received the greatest gift of her life. I sat silently. In my lap was a small white envelope, no heavier than a single sheet of paper. No shiny box, no elegant bow. Just a plain envelope, unmentioned, no one waiting for me to open it. I didn't even need to look inside to know there was nothing special. Dad had handed it to me quickly, like a chore he had to check off. No warm gaze, no trembling voice of emotion, just a nod and a hollow phrase. "This is for you." I ran my finger along the edge of the envelope, feeling the thin, weightless paper inside. Meanwhile, Lauren was still holding up the key like it was a royal crown. She beamed, pure joy shining in her eyes without a hint of restraint. And I just quietly clenched my envelope. Because I knew exactly what it meant. It wasn't just a half-hearted Christmas present. It was a statement, a reminder, a message that didn't need to be spoken. In this family, Lauren was the most important one. And I was just the leftover. I tightened my grip on the envelope, feeling the paper so fragile it might tear with the slightest squeeze. But I didn't open it. There was no need. I already knew what was inside. A lifeless card, maybe with a small check, just enough for my parents to tell themselves they still cared, but not enough for me to think I actually mattered. Lauren kept smiling, holding the key up like it was a piece of fine jewelry. I quietly looked away from the scene. I didn't want to see anymore. Because I knew, if I kept watching, the memories would start flooding back, and I didn't have the strength to hold them off. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memories take me. My 9th birthday. I had been excited all week, planning a little party by myself. I didn't ask for much. Just a small cake, a warm dinner with my family, and maybe a little present. But that morning, Mom told me Lauren had a big rehearsal for her upcoming ballet performance. "You know your sister needs to focus on her performance, right? Opportunities like this don't come often," she said, her voice light, like it wasn't a big deal. I nodded, swallowing the disappointment curling in my chest. So instead of a birthday party, I sat alone in the kitchen, baking my own cake. I spread the frosting and tried to decorate it with little chocolate flowers, telling myself the cake was enough. But that night when I blew out the candles, alone, while everyone talked about Lauren's rehearsal, I realized something. It wasn't that they forgot my birthday. They just didn't care. 8th grade science fair. I had spent weeks building a wind turbine model, a project so detailed that even my science teacher was impressed by its precision. When the results came in, I won first place. That sense of pride lasted only a few minutes, until I realized my parents weren't in the crowd clapping. I stood on stage, hands trembling as I held my certificate, scanning the audience. But no one was there. Later, when I got home, Mom didn't even remember the fair was that day. "We had to take Lauren to an audition. You know those chances don't come easy," she said, not even looking up from her phone. Dad just nodded, like it wasn't worth talking about. And I quietly tucked the certificate into a drawer, where no one ever mentioned it again. Senior year scholarship. I used to think if I tried just a little harder, if I achieved something truly big, they'd have to see me differently. So I pushed myself, studying late every night, signing up for every test, joining every activity that might catch the admissions board's attention. And finally, after all that effort, I got a full-ride scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. I walked into the living room, heart pounding, hoping for that proud, overjoyed reaction. But when I placed the acceptance letter on the table, Mom glanced at it for a second and sighed. "At least you're good at something." That was it. No hug, no celebratory dinner, not even a word of encouragement. All my hard work, sleepless nights, and stress boiled down to a careless remark. And Lauren? When she got into a regular art school, my parents threw her a party, invited neighbors, bragged about her promising future. I opened my eyes, pulling myself back to the present. Lauren was still beaming, hugging Mom, thanking her over and over. I relaxed my hand, letting the envelope fall into my lap. Those memories weren't random moments. They were proof of an undeniable truth. I had never mattered in this family. Lauren was the shining star, and I was just a shadow. But what they didn't know was that shadows had their own kind of power. This year, I wouldn't let them do it again. 2 weeks after Christmas, when the holiday lights had gone out and everyone had returned to their regular routines, I got a call from Mom. "Melissa, your dad hurt his back while cleaning out the garage. Come home and help him a bit." Her voice was soft but tired. I almost said no. After everything that happened on Christmas Eve, I didn't want to go back there. But then, something inside me stirred. Not concern for Dad, but a sense that something wasn't right. My family never called me home unless they needed something. After a brief pause, I said, "I'll come." That afternoon, I drove to the house, feeling like a stranger the moment I stepped through the door. Everything looked the same. Too perfect, too meticulously arranged like a postcard. The walls were still covered with photos of Lauren, her first ballet performance, the celebration for her role in a small play, her graduation from an art school my parents once bragged about to everyone, and me. Just one small photo on the bookshelf, the only one from my college graduation, partly hidden behind a stack of magazines. I walked into the living room where Dad was sitting in an armchair, rubbing his back, wincing like he was in pain. "Can you help me rearrange some boxes in the garage?" he asked, without a single greeting. I nodded. If they saw me as just the help, I would play that role. One last time. While I was organizing the old boxes, I noticed Dad's office door wasn't closed like it usually was. It was slightly ajar, and inside, a faint glow from the desk lamp spilled out. Something drew me in. The office was still tidy, but something felt off. The safe, which Dad always kept locked, was slightly open, like someone had forgotten to shut it properly. Dad was meticulous. He never forgot to lock the safe. My heart pounded. Part of me said to walk away, but another part pushed me forward. I swallowed hard and slowly opened the safe door. Inside were stacks of neatly arranged documents. I ran my fingers across the folders until I saw a large envelope with messy handwriting. "Open only if I die." My hands shook. What was this? Without hesitation, I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of legal documents, numbers, signatures. But when I read the first page, a chill ran down my spine. My name, on a property deed. I read it again and again, thinking I must be mistaken. But no. The document clearly stated that an apartment belonged to me, purchased 5 years ago, in my name. I had never heard of this. I kept flipping through the pages, my heart pounding. Bank statements, loans, strange transactions, all under my name. But what made me go cold were the signatures. They were mine. Only one problem. I had never signed any of it. I gripped the edge of the documents. What had they done? What had my parents done with my name? I skimmed the financial records, each line of text slicing deeper into my awareness. Mortgages, wire transfers, all executed in my name. And worse yet, a large loan taken out just 3 years ago to pay for Lauren. I couldn't believe it. They had used my name to borrow money to support her, without ever asking me. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. They had used me. They turned me into their financial shadow, their safety net, a name they could manipulate with ease. I placed the stack of documents on the desk, trying to breathe slowly to stay calm. But the truth? I wasn't calm at all. The betrayal was twisting inside me like an underground current, ready to break the surface. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them again. This time, I wouldn't let it go. They thought I'd always be the one standing in the background, the obedient daughter who silently accepted the unfairness. But they were wrong. I walked out of Dad's office, still clutching the stack of documents I had found. My heart was pounding in my chest, but not from fear, from rage. They had used me for years without my knowledge. They used my name to borrow money, to cover up their financial messes, to keep spoiling Lauren, without once thinking of the consequences. But this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. That night, I went back to my apartment, spread the documents out on the table, and combed through every number. I wasn't a financial expert, but I saw enough to know how serious this was. I needed someone who could help me unravel everything. The next morning, I called Ethan, a financial lawyer I'd worked with on a past project. Ethan wasn't just smart, he was thorough and cautious. "Melissa? Long time no talk. What's going on?" His voice came through the phone, calm and professional. "I need your help," I said plainly. "It's pretty big." I sent him all the documents I had and scheduled a meeting with him that same afternoon. When I walked into his office, his eyes were already serious. "Melissa," he began, sliding the papers back toward me. "This isn't just financial misuse. This is fraud. If you want, you can press charges." I took a deep breath. I didn't want things to go that far, at least not yet. What I wanted was a plan. A way to take back what was mine, without a direct confrontation. "I need to know what they did with the money," I said. "What assets they used as collateral, how much they still owe." Ethan nodded, and after a few days of digging, he came back with information that stunned me. The lake house. It was the house my parents used to brag about as a precious family asset. A place they and Lauren visited every summer while I was rarely invited. They had mortgaged it 3 years ago to pay off debt. Lauren's debt. Ethan showed me the loan documents. My parents had used the house as collateral to help Lauren start her own fashion brand, and as I had suspected, it failed. Worse, they had fallen behind on the payments, and now the house was about to be repossessed and sold at auction by the bank. A slow smile spread across my face. I didn't need to confront them. I didn't need to yell or argue. I was going to do something they'd never expect. I was going to buy that house. I couldn't let my parents know I was behind the purchase. If they found out, they'd try to stop me. So Ethan and I came up with a plan. We would use a third party, a trusted investment firm Ethan had connections with, to buy the house from the bank without my name ever appearing. The purchase went through faster than I expected. Within a few weeks, the paperwork was complete. I looked at the new ownership contract. Now, the lake house no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. But I didn't announce it right away. I waited patiently, watching my parents' every move. I listened as they complained to friends about how the bank was being unfair by seizing the house. I saw my mom desperately calling people she knew, trying to borrow money to buy it back. I read Lauren's texts, furious that our parents are so useless for not keeping the family's precious property. And I waited. Waited for the perfect day to reveal everything. Christmas. The Christmas tree in the living room was just as lavishly decorated as every other year, glowing with soft yellow lights and bright red ornaments. The scent of gingerbread and cinnamon wafted from the kitchen, mixing with the artificial holiday cheer my family worked so hard to create. I stood by the window, watching the snow fall slowly through the glass, feeling unusually calm. They had no idea. They didn't know that this Christmas would be unlike any other before. Lauren sat in the center of the living room, as if it were her own private celebration. Her red-painted nails traced the rim of a wine glass, her lips curved into a satisfied smile. She was certain she'd receive yet another extravagant gift tonight. A new car, a luxury vacation, or a piece of jewelry worth a year's salary to most people. My mother stepped forward, holding a gift wrapped in elegant silver paper. "Sweetheart Lauren, this is a very special present just for you." Lauren blinked excitedly, quickly tearing off the wrapping like a child. When the box lid came off, she let out a breathy sigh of satisfaction. "A key. Guess what?" My mom smiled, pride in her voice. "We bought you a new apartment. A perfect place, right in the city center, modern, elegant. You deserve it." Lauren beamed, throwing her arms around both of them, sneaking a glance at me as if to say, once again, "This is how things are. This is where I belong." I clenched my fists in my coat pockets. They hadn't changed. They never would. But that was okay, because tonight, everything would be different. I waited until the laughter and congratulatory chatter about Lauren's gift died down. Once everyone had returned to their seats, I stood up slowly and pulled a small white box from my bag. "I have a gift for you, too," I said, my voice calm but echoing in the room. My dad frowned as he took the box from me. It wasn't wrapped in shiny paper, no bow, no decorations. Just a plain box. But I knew what was inside was worth more than any gift they'd ever received. He opened it and pulled out a thick envelope bearing a law firm's logo in the corner. "What's this?" he asked, flipping open the stack of documents. It took exactly 3 seconds. My mom stared at the pages, her eyes widening as she realized what she was looking at. Lauren leaned forward, trying to read the bolded lines. The room fell completely silent. A moment ago, Lauren had been glowing. Now she stared at me, confused, waiting for an explanation. My dad turned the pages over and over, as if hoping the content would somehow change. But it didn't. It was clear from the very beginning. I was the legal owner of the lake house. The house they once called their treasure, the house they used to show off to their friends, the house they secretly mortgaged to pay off Lauren's debts. And now it belonged to me. My dad took a deep breath, gripping the papers so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Melissa, this can't be right." "It's completely legal." I sat down, crossed my legs, and looked straight at them. "You couldn't keep up with the debt. The bank seized the property. And I bought it through a third party." My mom's mouth fell open, but no words came out. Lauren shook her head over and over, like she'd just heard the most absurd thing in the world. "No way. That house has always belonged to this family." I met her gaze, my voice steady and firm. "Lauren, let me make this very clear. It's not this family's. It's mine." The air in the room grew heavy. My mother began to tremble, her eyes darting around, searching for a reason, a way to fix this. "We can work something out," she said, voice hopeful. "We can find a way to keep the house." I tilted my head slightly, a cold smile tugging at my lips. "No." My dad slammed his hand on the table, his eyes burning with fury. "Do you even know what you're doing? That house is part of our family." I raised an eyebrow, leaning forward, my voice sharper than ever. "Family? Are you talking about the family that used my name to take out loans? The family that forged my signature to cover up Lauren's mistakes? The family that's treated me like I was invisible?" My mom went pale. Lauren stared at me in shock. Finally, my dad muttered, his voice low and threatening. "If you walk out of here, you're no longer part of this family." I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked to the door. Before opening it, I turned around and looked at each person in the room. Fine, because I never truly belonged to this family. Then I slammed the door behind me. Stepping out into the white snow, I took a deep breath. The air was freezing, but for the first time in years, I felt light. I walked away from that house, leaving behind the angry shouts and desperate pleas. The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off everything I had once tried to hold on to. Recognition, affection, or any hope that they would ever change. The snow was falling heavier as I made my way to the car, tiny flakes clinging to my black coat. I opened the door, sat in the driver's seat, but didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the soft yellow lights glowing from the living room window. Inside, I knew everything was falling apart. My dad would be flipping through the documents, searching for some legal loophole to reclaim the lake house. But there wasn't one. I had made sure every detail was airtight and lawful. My mom was probably already on the phone with someone she knew, trying to find a way to negotiate, to find someone who could talk me out of it. But just like always, she wasn't doing it out of love, only because she needed a solution. Lauren. I could imagine exactly how she was reacting. Her blue eyes wide with disbelief, her perfect mouth twisted in rage. She had never imagined a day when something wouldn't be hers. Her whole life, she had believed that if anything ever went wrong, our parents would fix it, would find a way, would make sure she kept everything. But not this time. I started the engine and drove away from that place without looking back once. In the days that followed, my phone buzzed constantly with missed calls and messages from my family. Mom called, Dad called, even Lauren sent long, rambling texts, demanding answers, accusing me, throwing cruel words my way. "Who do you think you are? You've destroyed this family. Give the house back. Our parents spent their whole lives building it. You have no right to take it." Achilles respond. When the threats didn't work, they turned to begging. My mother left a long voicemail, her voice hoarse like she'd been crying. "Melissa, you know we have nowhere to go if we lose the lake house. This isn't just property, it's our family's history. Please, think it over. I'm begging you." I didn't respond. Then came a message from my dad, shorter but laced with anger. "You can't do this to your own family." But what had they done to me all these years? Not once did anyone think they couldn't do this to me. Weeks passed, and the messages started to slow down. News from acquaintances told me my family was in serious financial trouble. They had lost the most valuable asset they ever owned, the one they used as collateral for every previous loan. Without the lake house, the bank wasn't lenient anymore. My mom had to sell off many valuable items to try and cover some of the debt. My dad, the man who once prided himself on holding the family together, was now searching for a job at nearly retirement age. Lauren. She couldn't accept the truth. I heard she had begged our parents to fix it, but they had no way left. I could picture her frantically calling every connection she had, but no one was willing to help. The luxurious life she once took for granted was slowly crumbling. And me. I didn't care. I spent my time fixing up the lake house, turning it into a place that truly belonged to me. No more objects my parents had chosen to show off their status. No more photos of Lauren everywhere. I changed everything, every curtain, every rug, every picture frame. I made it into a space that was mine alone, with no trace of the past. Each morning I made coffee and sat by the window, looking out over the still lake, listening to birds instead of familiar, cold criticism. No more dinners where I was the quiet shadow beside Lauren. No more hollow glances when I tried to prove I mattered. No more hopeless waiting for the day they might love me the way I deserved. They had lost me a long time ago. Now, I'm no longer the daughter of that family. I am simply myself. The wind swept gently across the lake, carrying a crisp chill of winter. I stood on the front porch of the lake house, a cup of hot tea in hand, and took a deep breath. No more messages, no more calls, no more anger or pleading from my parents or Lauren. Only silence. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. In the early days after leaving my family, I thought I'd feel empty, that a part of me would want to go back, hoping for remorse, an apology, some small sign that they realized what they had done. But then I realized I wasn't waiting for that anymore. What I used to want, love, recognition, the feeling of being valued, had died long ago. And that death didn't happen on Christmas Eve when I walked out. It had started years earlier, in the forgotten birthdays, the missed accomplishments, the countless times I gave my all and still remained a fading shadow. I used to think that if I could reclaim the lake house, if I could make them see how wrong they'd been, I would feel victorious. But as I watched them fall apart, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No revenge. Only freedom. I didn't take back the house to get back at them. I took it back because it was mine. Because for the first time in my life, I wanted something that belonged solely to me. Something that couldn't be taken away, denied, or dismissed. I had spent too many years chasing love from people who never intended to give it. And now, I had stopped hoping they ever would. True freedom didn't come from defeating them. It came from letting go of the expectation that they would become who I needed them to be. I spent the following weeks restoring the house, corner by corner. Every trace of my family slowly disappeared. I took down Lauren's old pictures and replaced them with photos I loved. I repainted the bland beige walls with warmer tones. I laid down new rugs, chose furniture I actually liked, not things meant to flaunt wealth. Each morning I woke up, made coffee, and sat by the window looking out over the still lake. I didn't think about them anymore. I didn't wonder what they were doing, if they regretted anything, or if they realized what they had lost. Because it didn't matter anymore. I used to believe that freedom came when I could look them in the eyes and prove I was stronger, that I didn't need them. But it turns out, freedom came from something much simpler. Not thinking about them at all. No longer letting them control my emotions. No longer feeling the need to react to anything they did or said. My life now didn't include them. And I felt more at peace than ever. One late afternoon, as I was walking around the lake, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I stared at the screen, that old feeling briefly returning. Anxious, uncertain, expectant. But this time, I simply smiled and didn't answer. I didn't need to know who it was. Maybe it was my parents. Maybe it was Lauren. Maybe it was someone from my past. But I had left the past behind. And Miss Reese's story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about reclaiming self-worth. In life, many people spend years chasing validation from those who will never truly value them. But freedom doesn't come from making others regret. It comes from letting go of empty expectations and choosing yourself. When we stop waiting for love from those who don't know how to give it, only then can we truly be free. Happiness isn't in forgiveness or revenge. It's in choosing to live for yourself. What do you think about Melissa's story? Was she right to take back what was hers and walk away from a toxic family? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about family and life.